In 1864, over the 3 years, as this area begins to grow and people aspire to become a state, there are a couple of efforts that are made to get enabling legislation to become a state. And clearly, it's not about the gold and silver now. This is a long-standing myth. The money's already coming in. We're a territory. We're an extension of the federal government. It has to do with Lincoln's re-election. It has to do with a very close race. It has to do with the Reconstruction of the South. It has to do with the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment. Currently, the 13th Amendment is going through Congress. And we are brought in to help support Lincoln's re-election. It looked like it was going to be a very complex situation, three-way race. Ultimately, it ended up being a two-way race, and he carried Nevada. What happens? Now, the first territorial prison is now the first state prison, and it is owned by the new state. Okay? The beginnings of Nevada were there, and it all started shortly thereafter is your prison system. How intimate, how symbiotic. Now, as it began to grow, and I'm trying to suggest as you walk through Carson City, and before you leave, those of you who are not familiar with Carson City, is the landscape of Carson City, the historical landscape of Carson City, has essentially been shaped by the prison because of that quarry. Okay? And I ask you to look at the state capitol. And what do you see? You see stones quarried by those inmates and everything that happened there. The orphans' home, which has now been torn down, that was the essential building material. The state printing building, which is part of the State Library and Archives. And when you were out in the lobby, that was that building with the sandstone there. That was quarried. And the people that were involved in that quarrying, who was it? These were prisoners, but what else? They also did some of the construction work. They helped build the town, as opposed to San Francisco, the town was built on rock and roll. Okay, Carson City was built on prison labor and prison industry. That's how intimate the relationship was. So we have this dynamic. We have other industry over here in Empire, just east of us here. We have mills that are constructed along the river, and some of their building material is the sandstone. And they're processing silver and gold. They would last for so long, through the early 20th century, and then they would come and go. And that's the point I want to make here. All these entities came and they went. The prison is still here today. Lumber from the Carson Range to the west and the Lake Tahoe Basin to build all these towns, to shore up the mines underground, the square set timbering. Huge operations, and it brought Chinese people. It brought French Canadians to cut the lumber. And we had all this presence. But with the decline of the Comstock and the industry, they came and they went. There are no Chinese that have any direct connection anymore. The French Canadians have essentially assimilated and acculturated. The neighborhoods are gone. The prison is still here. The V&T Railroad was constructed. We had a railroad that ran through it. A very famous railroad that came from Virginia City to Carson City in 1869, extended to Reno in 1872 to connect with the Central Pacific Railroad, moving tons of ore and tons of people, major events, major entertainers. Was associated with a great fight, Corbett Fitzsimmons World Heavyweight Championship fight we had here in 1897. That train would move those people to bring them here. And that train lasted until 1950. It's been discontinued. The train is gone. The prison is still here. Okay. Now we want to reinstitute that and create a new one. And we'll see if that happens as far as setting up a tourist destination point. A U.S. Mint. We had a federal presence in the U.S. Mint. You ever seen the Mint? That's our state museum. What do you think it's built of? Abe Curry built it. Abe Curry went and lobbied for it. And when he got it, he built it with the sandstone from the quarry of the prison. Okay? Working with Congress. We had another federal presence here. We have our old federal building, which our Commission on Tourism is in. But the feds are gone. They've moved to Reno. They've taken their courts and all their other entities. They're gone. The prisons are still here. We had a large Jewish community, which you wouldn't know today, but they were here. They were following the frontier opportunities, neighborhoods, involved in the business endeavors. But with the decline of the mining, they too moved on. We had an Indian school, 1890 to 1980. Look at some of the building materials there. They've used some of the new materials, the river rock and some of the other things, but they used some of that early material. But they're gone. That federal entity's gone. The prisons are still here. The Lincoln Highway was built through here, the earliest transcontinental highway in the nation, beginning in 1913. Who helped build some of those roads? Who kept some of those roads up? Who did the labor? Inmate labor, prison labor. We had ranches here, Swiss Italians and others, Germans, and all sorts of creameries and cattle and sheep. But so did the prison. Didn't the prison? 1910. They established the prison farm in 1910. And let me see if I can just focus on that. At that farm, and did anybody get a chance to tour a little bit? That farm originally was 1,180 acres at the south end of Carson City. It's now near the Northern Nevada Correctional Center. That dates back to 1964. Cattle, milk cows, horses, chickens, hogs, alfalfa cultivation, food crops. Okay? There was even some crop cultivation west of the state prison for a while. They would take the hot water, cool it down, irrigate the land, and try to grow crops there. Again, the prison presence virtually everywhere, trying to be self-sustaining and selling some of their products. Clearly, after World War II, people find Carson City, we grow, we begin to see warehousing and light industry in the 1960s. We're no longer the smallest state capital. We took great pride that we were the smallest state capital nation. Well, Montpelier, Vermont has that title today, and so does a number of other capitals that are much smaller. But yet, the prison system had to expand to meet the needs of a very growing state and a very dynamic state. And they built the Northern Nevada Correctional Center in 1964, really the second facility. After 100 years, it took 100 years to get the second facility. They got the second facility. Now, how many have been in the last 40? What does that say? Come on. The change has been dynamic, and the need has been dynamic. And, of course, we had a women's prison that was associated with what you call Warm Springs as well. And, of course, our Stewart Conservation Camp was established in 1980. We've seen dramatic change in Carson City. We've seen dramatic change in the Department of Prisons, Department of Corrections now. And I've tried to point out to you that relationship that has been so symbiotic, so integral. I just want to point out a few more of the structures that stand out in our community. The Armory building, that's right across the street from the State Library and Archives. If you walked outside the building, gone to the east, there it is, quarried from the same stone. The V&T Engine House, which is gone now. Wonderful. It's where they brought all the trains in to be worked on, and we sadly lost that as a feature in our community. And I think a tremendous loss. Maybe it helped to save some more things. We have to lose something to gain something. That's maybe part of life, it seems to me. But who built that? Abe Curry. What did he build it with? Sandstone from the quarry. William Stewart and James W. Nye's house. Our first United States Senator and our first territorial governor. And our only territorial governor. Where did they live in? In a house built of that quarried sandstone. Abe Curry's house. Go over to the west side. Before you leave, walk through. Of course, he wouldn't build his house on anything else, would he? Okay. And what's interesting, some of the other efforts in terms of entrepreneurial activity, prison industry. There was a boot and shoe factory late in the 1800s. An effort to, first of all, supply the inmates and as well as try to sell some of the product. What struck me also was the planting of trees, okay, that kind of urban foresting. And in 1912, there were 50 cottonwood trees planted on the old prison road. You saw a few of them. A few of them are still there. 1912, now East 5th Street. Firefighting, dating back to at least the 1920s in my research. And I'm going to talk more about that as a conclusion. Emergency support for flood control and community projects. Close working relationship Stewart Conservation Camp with the Division of Forestry in these kind of endeavors and other forestry endeavors. Anytime you look at a vehicle and it's properly licensed, what are we looking at? We're looking at license plates every day. And my research indicates the legislation was passed in 1931. Your driveway, your garage, the prison lives with you. The governor's household staff at the mansion. And at one time, the governor's driver was an inmate trustee, until one inmate trustee got very creative. They eventually caught him. But I think that job as driver did not continue in that capacity. I must say, in the more exotic and colorful category, bear with me, we had a prison casino for inmates known as the Bullpen, operated at the state prison from shortly after casino gambling was legalized in 1931 until 1967. I don't think anybody will top that. The tribes or any other state that does that will be very, very colorful, and only in Nevada, I suspect.